What does a personal boundary feel like? I just uh, facilitated my personal boundaries workshop yesterday, and it's interesting because I think the first level, and I'm not just talking about how other people, but myself, when I started understanding personal boundaries, and it's kind of funny because if you think that that I just woke up and I understood personal boundaries. It's actually 180 degrees from that. I actually, when I started my um, spiritual or transformational process, whatever you want to call it, what I wanted to do was break down all barriers. I felt like, oh man, like, I just want to be like Jesus and love everybody and blah, blah, blah. And I began to learn through experience that that is not how this works. Um, you don't just you don't just give yourself away in every situation. It's not how it works. Our culture is not uh, attuned to personal boundaries. Um, you know, narcissism and codependency wouldn't exist if uh, if if we were all prolific boundary setters. Like if we were all speaking our truth, then we would understand like we don't have any. It's a control thing. The reason for boundaries is because somebody's either trying to take control or they're trying to cede control, and you can kind of see which one's which, codependency or narcissism. And so like the first step when people what I now see as I'm teaching these personal boundaries workshops is people want to like know exactly like a scripted thing. They want a script for every situation that you're going to step into where you're going to need to set a boundary. What are the words that you're going to need in order to set that boundary? And that's the conceptual idea. And it's so what I wanted to share in this video is what do I feel like when I'm going to give you a couple of stories of what it's like when I set a boundary correctly and when I don't set a boundary correctly. So it isn't just it's okay, like that's the juvenile stage of the process of learning boundaries is kind of having a script ready to go. Um, and then when you become so attuned to your truth, you can be fully present and you don't have to go through any thought process in a situation as to what the words are because you've practiced so much. And that's the way I feel is that I practice all the time trying to speak my truth in the most beautiful way. And um, I use my own process, my own, thinking about and thinking awareness about when I'm doing it correctly and when I'm not doing it correctly. So there's been all these different stages, and it's like this up and down thing. When you first start setting boundaries, you kind of want to have all the scripts and everything else. And then eventually you get to a point where boundary setting becomes this natural flow. And that means that you can stand in the present moment and in your truth, and the words just flow out. What needs to be said is said perfectly. And so there's an absolute feeling that you get when you've set a powerful um, boundary. And then afterwards, you can look at, how the situation went down and go, wow, yeah, I can reflect on my situation and go, yep, that was a powerful boundary coming not from a thinking process of, oh, I got to figure out a witty way to say this or do this or make a decision. It was I knew what was right because I was so connected to being present, that the right words came out. And what I believe is happening in the bigger picture of personal boundaries is that when I'm setting boundaries, what I'm doing is I'm writing the world. So it's my responsibility to write from my perspective. It's there are people that should be in my life. There are things that need to be done in order to help each other interdependently, and that's what I've come to is this understanding of interdependency. And so by speaking my truth in the most powerful way that I possibly can, I'm writing the world. That's my responsibility. It's my responsibility to set boundaries. Um, and I don't need to come, and that feeling doesn't have to come from a place of resentment, anger, or anything else. It can be um, just this needed to be done. So here's an example. Um, I was I've been doing a murder mystery thing for 5 years, and I've done hundreds of shows. I've never once kicked out an audience member because I've always had a pretty good rapport with people. If they've been, a lot of people drink a little bit too much. They get a little, exuberant. They're noisy. People just want to talk when they're having dinner and these kind of things. But it's disturbing for everybody else that can't hear the show that's going on. And so, I can usually talk to people and get them, to change their behavior. So I've never had to actually kick somebody else. I don't even know that I've thought too much about the fact that I might someday need to kick them out. Anyway, I substituted and I was a co-host the other night, and there was a table that was a little rowdy, and some of the other cast members were talking about it, and the host, and it's just very normal. It's rarely do we have a show where there isn't like at least one table where there's a little bit of exuberance. So it didn't really stick with me. And so the show was, or one of the acts was just about to come up, and then kind of the whole audience started to kind of the energy started to come up, and there was a little talking over the actors who were trying to finish the scene. And so the host had walked up and said, shh, like trying to get the crowd to be quiet. And this one guy at this table just yelled out, "Bullshit!" And there wasn't a thinking process. Like the minute he did it, I beelined, like my body just went. It knew the truth, went over, and I leaned down to him and I said, why do you need to cuss like that and yell out? And he was, and then he tried to play the strong man. And he tried and so he like puts out his hand to shake my hand. He's like, "Who are you?" And I could see that he's really angry. And he said, "Well, you shush me." And I said, "Sir, I didn't shush you. I don't shush you." But I had noticed that maybe that the host had shushed him. And I can understand because shushing is, to me, shushing another adult straight at them, to me, is an escalating behavior. And so I would feel for the gentleman for doing that, but he still has the responsibility to keep his anger under control. Um, I said, "I'm Jim Sharp," and and he said who he was, and I said, "Well, here's the deal. Why did why are you yelling out?" And he said, "Because I paid my money to be at this show." And I said, "Okay." I said, "But you realize that you're cursing, and there's people around you and other people that have paid for the show as well." And then he started just getting angry, and I could just sense that his anger level was going up, and it just naturally flowed to me. I said, "I'm asking you to leave." And he said, "When?" And I said, "I'm asking you to leave right now." And I was surprised because I thought because his anger had come up, I thought he was going to fight me. And I didn't know physically or, verbally, but I assumed one of the two. And he just said, "Okay." Got his stuff up, kind of said a few little, "Oh, I guess I'm being asked to leave." And he walked out. And it was afterwards, like I looked at that situation and I went, "Wow." At no time did I have a thinking process. Was I putting, was my mind having to go, he paid. Is he going to get mad at me? Am I going to get fired from this job? Did I go too far? Like, I knew in that moment, my gut and my intuition said that dude needs to leave. And there wasn't a thinking process behind it. And the reason I tell you that is because to me, that's when you know when you finally hit this mature level of boundary setting is where you don't have to think about it, because our mind will go through so many different scenarios in the process, and in that process we'll come up with anger, and we have to justify our behavior because we're angry, instead of just justifying our behavior because it's the right thing to do. So, and it was great afterwards. There was a lot that I didn't know what was going on until after I kicked him out, and I found out that the table was very happy that I had kicked him out. I had assumed they were all together, but he had been harassing some other people, and especially a young lady at the table, and found out that he was also harassing the cast and that sort of thing. So that confirmed for me a mature setting of boundaries. Well, that could come across as, me bragging about my boundary setting. So let me tell you a story where I did not set my boundaries. I was not present, and I didn't set the boundary, and I wasn't helping us be interdependent with each other. And you may you may actually connect with this next story. So this was actually yesterday, driving to my personal boundaries class. Wide 3 lanes of traffic, and I'm basically the only car driving in the right-hand lane, and just wide open. And this guy pulls out right in front of me out of a gas station, and then just like dawdles and is going slow. So I had to like slam on my brakes, and I mean, it wasn't super bad. I mean, if he was doing it malevolently, it was a complete asshole move. If he was doing it unconsciously, just didn't pay attention or actually didn't see me, then it was dangerous, and he shouldn't have done it. So what was my behavior when it happened? I did the aggressive blinker. Anger just rose up in me. Did the quick whip right around him, and I'm thinking to myself, and I kind of looked at us when I went by, and he did not seem present. He didn't seem like he was kind of in his day, and he was doing something else, and blah blah blah. And my thought was, I'm angry, like asshole, like why did you do that? And I thought, like, how ridiculous is this, that I have anger and I'm harboring anger, and this dude doesn't even know. Um, he probably doesn't even understand the behavior that he did, and he doesn't know that I'm angry. So basically, this is that saying that says, anger's like resentment is drinking poison and hoping somebody else dies, and that was exactly what I was doing. I was drinking the poison of anger, and um, and hoping that dude got the lesson. And so I was just like, okay, take that breath, let the anger go. And then I was like, okay, now I've got to go back. I knew that I wasn't in the mature level of boundary setting at that point. There was no hope for that happening, because that happens when it's natural and it's in the flow. So I knew I needed to come back down to the script level and say that what should I have done? And I believe that the right move would have been to just honk my horn. And I'm not talking about like anger, you asshole, kind of, assuming the guy is malevolent. It's more like, and the message is, dude, like, wake up from wherever you are, because we're all trying to cooperate here on the road, and what you just did was not cooperating. And so to me, that's what personal boundaries does, is it helps us right the world. And I try to take responsibility for helping other people recognize their behavior. And the thing about being in traffic, and I think this is the big thing, is that when we see something like that happen, my first reaction and gut reaction was that he did it out of malevolence. And as I drove by him, I realized that it could have been, that he just was not together, and it's, or he wasn't present in his day. Um, and so that, and I want to be more of in the first reaction is that they really just don't know, because I don't think that we have too many people in our culture in every situation that are actually just trying to be an asshole. We do have them. I'm not discounting that, but I do not believe it's most. I mean, and if you just look at the statistics just for yourself, I figured out the other day that I had driven like 500,000 miles in my lifetime, and and I do have bad experiences. People come in and out, but I've passed millions and millions and millions of cars that, like, 98%, 99% of the time that I'm driving, everybody's cooperating. And it's the 1%, the 2% that makes us believe that, that there's all these aggressive drivers out there. And I don't want my, I don't want my mind assuming malevolence when in reality, the statistics show me that it's, you know, that people are cooperating more than they're not cooperating.